Jake Harper here again, and we're continuing our discussion of what is the Sabbath. This is the first part of a series on a Sabbath to Yahweh. And we're talking about what is the Sabbath, because how can you know how to do something if you don't even know what it is you're supposed to be doing? In part 1a, we talked about how the Sabbath is a time set apart for God. In this part, 1b, we're going to talk about how the Sabbath is a statement of faith for all of God's people. I want to go back to Isaiah 58:13 and 14, and talk about a slightly different aspect of this passage. If you turn back your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, and the holy day of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh honorable, if you honor it, not going your own ways, or seeking your own pleasure, or talking idly, then you shall take delight in Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and I will make you ride on the heights of the earth. I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh has spoken. Remember that one of the things we're supposed to do on the Sabbath is to choose to find joy in resting with God. This is a day set apart in His honor, and we're supposed to enjoy it. It's not supposed to be a burden. But I think the most laborious part of Sabbath is not thinking about tomorrow. That's actually a hard thing to do. It takes a lot of practice. One thing that I've found helpful is to have some kind of ritual that you do at the beginning of Sabbath to set a work day apart from the rest day. The traditional Jewish way to do this is called an Erev Shabbat, or the Eve of Shabbat. In an Erev Shabbat, the family gathers around for a formal meal. The mother of the house lights some candles and says some blessings. The father says some blessings. There's a prayer, and when that's done, the Sabbath has begun. No more work after that point. And it takes practice. It really does help to create these fences to mark one day off from another, and that will help reinforce that habit. And as we learn to find joy in the Sabbath, God will reward us. This passage says, I will make you ride on the heights of the earth. Now, this isn't literally getting up high on the earth. It's not like God is going to put you in an airplane because you're keeping the Sabbath. This is about joy. God says, call the Sabbath a delight. And in doing so, God rewards you by making the Sabbath a delight. He says that He will feed us with the heritage of Jacob our father. He's talking about the covenant that He made with Jacob. And remember what God promised to Jacob when he left Canaan to go to his uncle Laban's house? I will be with you all the way there and back. I will see you there safely, and I will see you back safely. Trust in me. So the thing that we need to do is trust God's promises. God promises that if we call the Sabbath a delight, He will help us make it a delight. All we have to do is trust in Him and not in ourselves. In this passage, Exodus 16:4-5, Then Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, Behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. God gave the Hebrews two major tests in Egypt, Passover and Pharaoh's army. In the first test, God said, Kill a lamb and put the blood on the doorposts, and then stay in your house, and I will protect you. If you don't do this, the firstborn of your house will die. Those who trusted in God followed His instructions, and they were fine. Those who didn't believe Him went out of their house, and the firstborn of that house died on that night. The second test for the Hebrews in Egypt was Pharaoh's army. That night, after the angel of death passed over Egypt, God led His people out into the wilderness, into a narrow place right up against the Red Sea. There was Pharaoh at their back and the sea in front of them, and there didn't seem to be any hope. But God said, stand back and watch the salvation of Himself. All they had to do was trust in Him. God led them across the Red Sea and destroyed the army of Pharaoh. But there was another major test right after they crossed the Red Sea. It was before they got to Mount Sinai, before God gave them the Ten Commandments. God said, I'm going to send you manna from heaven. I'm going to feed you in the wilderness, but I'm only going to feed you for 6 days. And on the 6th day, I'm going to give you twice as much, so that on the 7th day, you can still eat without having to gather. If you gather more than you need on those first 6 days, it's going to rot by the next morning. But gather twice as much on the 6th day, and it won't rot. So the people of Israel gathered the manna every day. Some of them didn't believe God, and they gathered twice as much manna as they needed, and the next day it rotted. And then the 6th day came. Some of them still didn't believe God, and they did not gather twice as much manna on that day. And really, who can blame them? The last time they gathered more manna than they needed, it rotted. So why should this time be any different? It's different because God told them it is. He told them to gather twice as much manna on that 6th day, and it wouldn't rot the next morning. I imagine a lot of Hebrews were fasting on that first Sabbath day. One lesson we can derive from this is that it's important to trust God in both the negative and the positive. If God tells you not to do something, don't do that. It's for your own good. If God tells you to do something, do that, because that's for your own good. But Israel didn't trust him in either case, and they had to learn the hard way. But Israel's no different than you and me in this respect. Israel is a type of all mankind. We all fail to trust God. He gave us the Sabbath from the very beginning of creation. It was the first thing he did after he created mankind. And we didn't trust him. God likes to teach us through stories. He likes to teach us through examples. But we ignore his examples, we ignore his stories, and so God has to give us commandments. Do this, don't do that. And we still don't trust him. Keeping the Sabbath is a demonstration and a declaration of our faith in God. We rest on that day, even though it doesn't make any economic sense, because God said to, and that's it. This is Jay Carper from American Torah and CommonSenseBibleStudy.com. In the next installment, we'll talk about how the Sabbath is a day of rest, mercy, and healing. Until then, be blessed.